الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي واجعل لي وزيرا من أهلي ربي يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير وبك نستعين يا فتاح ربي زدني علما ربي هب لي حكما وألحقني بالصالحين ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب آمين يا أرحم الراحمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Once again, Alhamdulillah, today by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are going to cover ayah number 10, 11, 12 and 13 from Surah Imran. And first we'll go over by the word by word meaning, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
إن الذين كفروا لن تغني عنهم أموالهم ولا أولادهم من الله شيئا وأولئك هم وقود النار.
Inna, indeed, definitely, certainly, there is no doubt about it that alladhina, those who kafaru, those who disbelieved. It's a plural, those who disbelieved, the meaning, all those who disbelieved. Lan tughniya, lan, never, it's a stronger form. So lan tughniya will avail or will benefit. Anhum, for them, or not, it will not benefit them. What will not benefit them? Amwaluhum. Amwaluhum is grammatically smooth mudaf ilayhi, meaning amwal means the wealth, hum means theirs. So amwaluhum, their wealth. So not will benefit them, their wealth, wala, and not awladuhum, their children. Similar to amwaluhum, awladuhum, awlad, children, hum, their. So awladuhum, their children. So their mal will not benefit them, which is their wealth, and their awlad, their children will not benefit them. Those benefit whom? The not benefit whom? Those who disbelieved. Min Allahi, against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, shay'an. Shay'a is nothing or anything at all, right? Like we say inshallah. Sorry, not that. I'm sorry, anything, right? So against Allah, shay'an, anything. Wa ulaika, and those whom they are wuqud. Wuqud is the fuel, like the fuel that you put to burn the fire, the dry wood that you throw in, and the fuel to burn the fire. And the fuel of, they are the fuel of those people who disbelieve. They themselves are the fuel of annar, the fire, meaning the hellfire here. So here Allah Ta'ala is saying, Inna alladhina kafaru lan tughniya anhum amwaluhum wala awladuhum min Allahi shay'a wa ulaika hum wuqudun nar. Indeed, those who disbelieve, never will their wealth or their children benefit them, avail them against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all. And it is they who are the fuel of the fire. So it's a very strong words when say la tawni, right? A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Ayah number 11.
كدأب آل فرعون والذين من قبلهم كذبوا بآياتنا فأخذهم الله بذنوبهم والله شديد العقاب.
Kada'bi, like the behavior. Ka meaning like something, and we've done this before. Kamathili, right? Like so, ka like something. Da'bi, the behavior. Ali Fir'auna, Ali of the people of Fir'aun, Walladina, and those who min from were from qablihim, before them. Qabl is something before, and him there, so before them, meaning before Fir'aun. Kadzabu, they denied. Bi ayatina, they denied what? They denied our signs. Na is for our, referring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning they denied our signs, they denied the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَأَخَذَهُمْ, so fa is so, akhadha, to grab hold of something, to seize something, hum, them. So seized them. Who seized them? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala seized them, bidunubihim, for their sins. Dunub, for sins, him, theirs. So bidunubihim, for their sins. Wallahu, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, shadid is severe. Shadid, like we say shiddat, like something very strong, something very severe. Al-iqab is the punishment. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying theirs is like, meaning continuing from the last ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, indeed those who disbelieve, their wealth or children will not benefit against them, benefit them against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all. They are the fuel of the fire. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the example that how their example is just like the people of Pharaoh, of people of Pharaoh and those before them. They denied our signs. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees them for their sins, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very severe in penalty. Then the next ayah, number 12.
قل للذين كفروا ستغلبون وتحشرون إلى جهنم وبئس المهاد.
Kul, say, lilladina, to those who. So alladina and lam. So lam is the harf jar, meaning to. Alladina, those who. So kul, say, to those who. Kafaru, those who disbelieved. Satughlabuna, you will be overcome. وَتُحْشَرُونَ, and you will be gathered. إِلَى Jahannam, to the hellfire, the Jahannam. وَبِئْسَ الْمِهَادِ, and what is this Jahannam? It is a very evil, it's a very bad al-mihad, resting place. It's a very bad place to be in, to rest in. And so say to those who believe, so say to those who disbelieve, I'm sorry, so many slip of the tongues today. So say to those who disbelieve, you will be overcome and gathered together to hell, and wretched is the resting place. And number 13.
قد كان لكم آية في فئتين التقتا فئة تقاتل في سبيل الله وأخرى كافرة يرونهم مثليهم رأي العين والله يؤيد بنصره من يشاء إن في ذلك لعبرة لأولي الأبصار.
Qad, surely, kana, was, lakum, for you, ayatun, a sign, fi fi'ataini, in the two groups, in the two groups, al taqata, who met, which met, the two groups who met, and here it is referring to the Battle of Badr and the two groups that met each other in the Battle of Badr. So surely in this meeting was a sign for you, for all of you, when these two groups met each other. Fi'atun, one group, tuqatilu, was fighting, fi sabilillah, fi, in, sabil, the path, Allahi, of Allah. So fi sabilillah, in the path of Allah. Wa ukhra, and the other one, kafiratun, they were the disbelievers. Yarawnahum, they were seeing them. Mithlayhim, twice of them. Mithlay, just like them. So they were seeing them twice. We will go over it. What does it mean during the tafsir, inshallah. So they were seeing them, twice of them, ra'yal ayn, with the sight of al-ayn, the eyes. They were actually seeing them. It was not just something. It was not an illusion. It was not something which was they were just imagining it or something. They actually saw it like that. So they saw. They were seeing them twice of who they were, and just they were seeing with their eyes, and it appeared to them as twice. And to whom it appeared, which group appeared to which group twice, we will go over it. And there are multiple explanations of these, the different scholars have given. Wallahu, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yu'ayyidu, aid is to support, to help something, right? So to be a support for something. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he supports bi nasrihi, with his help. So three words here: bi, nasr, and he. So bi nasrihi, with, nasr is help, he, his. So bi nasrihi, with his help, man, whom, yasha'u, he wills. Inna fi dhalika, indeed in that, la ibratan, is surely a lesson, li ulil absar, for uli, the owners of, al absar. Absar from basara. Basara is to see. Like basarat is to see. And one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also al basir, the one who sees everything. So in this is a lesson for those who are the owners of sight, meaning those who can see, those who have vision. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, already there has been a sign for there has been for you a sign in the two armies which met, the two groups that met at Badr, one fighting in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and another of disbelievers. They saw them to be twice their own number by their eyesight. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala supports with his victory whom he wills. Indeed, in that is a lesson for those of vision. So we'll go in a bit more detail, inshallah. Ayah number 10. إن الذين كفروا لن تغني عنهم أموالهم ولا أولادهم من الله شيئا وأولئك هم وقود النار. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying first of all that indeed those who disbelieve, their wealth and children will not benefit them against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all, and they are those who are the fuel of the fire. First thing, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying إن الذين كفروا, kafaru here, the kafir, those who disbelieve, one thing to remember is it's not a lot of people nowadays they use, and we talked about in Surah Baqarah before as well. A lot of people use the word kafir for non-Muslims in general, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not referring to the kafir in general here, right? So, for example, when let's say one of us we convert, we belong to a family of we were not raised in a Muslim family and we become a Muslim, and then we are reading the ayah in Surah Baqarah, "Inna alladhina kafaru sawa'un alayhim a andartahum am lam tundirhum." Right, so that indeed those who disbelieve, that it makes no difference to them whether you warn them or you don't warn them, and they're not going to believe. When we read that, then we are like, okay, does this mean my family? Can I talk to my family about Islam, or would they accept it? Would they not accept it? Like it can, if we don't understand the context, it can create the like what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not referring to just anybody who's not a Muslim, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking about specific kind of people here, and that's why it's so important to understand the concept, that we don't generalize things overly, and we understand the ayat. And a lot of times when we hear people who are trying to undermine the Quran or trying to speak against the Quran, that's what they usually do to create doubts in the minds of people. They take ayat of the Quran, they interpret them without their context and without the how the Prophet ﷺ or the Sahabas interpreted them and everything, and then they create confusion knowingly and intentionally. They try to create confusion in the minds of people. So it's very important to understand what context the ayat is in and what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mean when he's saying kafaru in this ayat, right? So here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not meaning the non-Muslims. He does not, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, he does not hate humanity. He's made us because he loves and cares for us, right? But then there are some people, like they maybe they're heedless, or they don't have the knowledge yet, or they're not convinced enough yet, or something. So they might be non-Muslim because of that. And here they are not being referred to, right? So kafir here especially is someone to whom the truth has become very, very clear, and they reject it or cover it up, right? The word kafaru, the root words kafara, is also used for a farmer. Why? The farmer buries the seed under the sand. So there's something that he buries under, right? So here it's referring particularly to the Quraysh and the Yahud of that time, who understood the message of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ was the best one to give the message. He was giving the best message and in the best way possible, and they understood it, and yet they refused it, right? So here it's referring to especially those people of that time who refused to believe in the Quran as the book being revealed, as the revealed book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And earlier that we mentioned in ayah number 4, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, if you go back to ayah number 4, here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that Quran is a guidance for people, and he revealed the Quran, and those who disbelieve in the ayat of the Quran, for them there is a severe punishment. So in a way, it is being detailed now that what about these people? What are these people, and what are they? What is the kind of punishment? So that's being like detailed here. And the scholars say the one part of Quran does the tafsir of another part of the Quran as well, right? So here that's being talked about, especially those particular people. And so there's an incident that happened, like for like whatever goods, like there was Battle of Badr. So this is right after Battle of Badr. So right after Battle of Badr, what's happening? There are two things that's happening. One, we know what happened during the Battle of Badr. The Muslims had set out to intercept the caravan of Abu Sufyan, who was carrying all these goods and everything, and people had made all these investments from Mecca, and then he had gone for trading, and he was coming back with double the profit and everything, and he had like a huge amount of wealth and everything that the Muslims had gone to intercept, right? And their intention was not to engage in a war with a group. But Abu Sufyan had called for help, and Abu Jahl and had gathered all the people from all the people that he could gather from Mecca to gather a huge army of around 1,000 people, and they had set out to fight with the Muslims. Now, the Muslim and to save this caravan. Abu Sufyan, meanwhile, changed course, and he basically did not fall in the way of the Muslims, and he went ahead and he was safe. So he sent the message back to the other group of the Quraysh, the group headed by Abu Jahl, that that I'm safe and everything, and we don't need to fight anymore. You can go back. But this group, Abu Jahl and everything, they were all set out, and they were so arrogant, and they were like they felt that, you know what, we can just, now is the time, we are out and we have all this, we are so powerful, we have so many resources, we have, like, literally, they were so confident of their victory. They had got all alcohol, and they had got all the dancing ladies and everything to celebrate their victory and everything, that okay, we will have a huge celebration when we just get rid of all these Muslims and everything once and for all. So they were with that mindset coming there and everything, and then whatever happened at Badr, Muslims won and everything, and then what happened to this group, which of Abu Sufyan, which was there now in Makkah, was now all this money that they had. What they did was, all of them, they decided, this money, this wealth that we have, we will not we will not take it back and distribute it and give it back to all the families who have earned all this money. Rather, we'll all collectively decided that they will use all this money to now prepare for money, and they to prepare for a battle against Muslims, because they want to revenge. They want to seek revenge for all their leaders that have been killed. So they said that basically they said, okay, we will now prepare an army and put all this money and resources and like all of our manpower literally into fighting the people, fighting the Muslims, right? So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling for those people? The response here, it's coming that surely those who disbelieve, your wealth and your children. So what are they doing? They're putting their wealth and their children, manpower literally is the children of their tribes. So all the wealth and the children that you're putting together to fight, that shall not suffice you against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This will not benefit you in any way against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So don't feel that you're putting all these things together, that you will go and you'll be able to defeat the group of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That okay, do whatever you want, but they will not suffice you, right? So this ayah is telling them that, and those who disbelieve are ultimately the fuel of the fire. On the other hand, what also happened was when the Prophet ﷺ went back after Badr, when the Prophet ﷺ went back to Medina. Now, in Medina, there are different people. In Medina, there are Muslims. In Medina, there are people who are still idol worshippers. And in Medina, also, there are the Jewish community. There's a whole Jewish community who are the people of the book, who have different information and everything. And all three have made a pact before of a peace treaty, that how as a, in you can we can think of it as a political kind of a treaty that has been made between all three groups, how they will protect the city together, and how they basically they created like a state in which all three would have their own ways of doing things, and yet they will do this. They will be with each other and everything. When the Prophet ﷺ went back, and the Prophet ﷺ, we know that he was, who was he the prophet for? Was he the prophet for just Muslims? No, he was the prophet for, he was rahmah for lil alameen, for all people, for all nations, right? And the Prophet ﷺ was a prophet for all people, meaning he cared for and he loved all the people, even those people who were idol worshippers at that time, even those people who were Jewish at that time. Like sometimes we look at the word Jewish as like that, and that's a lot of political tension that has been created in the last 100 years. We look at the word Jewish as if, like we are just enemies and we are supposed to be enemies and this and that. But the Prophet ﷺ did not see it like that. The Prophet ﷺ saw them as people who were a part of his ummah, and he had to call them, like, there are, some of our teachers, they say that uh, all mankind after the Prophet ﷺ came is a part of the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. The difference is there are some people from the ummah that have accepted the message, and there's some who have not yet accepted the message. So what you're going to do with the message, or whether you become in his ummah or not, but everyone basically has a potential of being a part of his ummah. Anybody who is born during the time of the Prophet ﷺ or after that until the day of judgment. So the Prophet ﷺ went to the the Jewish community. He went to the tribe of Banu Qainqa, and in the marketplace he gathered them, and he said, to them. He invited them to Islam, basically saying that, "O you community of Jews, beware of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has inflicted upon Quraysh on the day of Badr, and embrace Islam before he inflicts upon you what he inflicted upon them. For you know that I am the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you find that in your scriptures, and that like that and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has obligated you to do so, because in their scriptures it did say that the prophet who would come, the final prophet that would come, he would be victorious, his flag won't go down, and everything. So this was one of the major signs for them, and we'll know, we will talk a little bit more about how the battle of Badr was such a major sign for them, right? So the Prophet ﷺ invited them, like that I'm a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this battle of Badr has basically made it really even more clear to you, to you. You have read in your scriptures and everything, and Allah ta'ala obligated you to believe in me. So believe in me. Now that you have understood, you believe in me, and so that just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has inflicted punishment upon these Quraysh, He doesn't. I'm worried for you. I don't want you to have the same fate. So accept the message of Islam and become Muslims. And the leaders there of they replied to the Prophet ﷺ in a very, very, very rude tone. Astaghfirullah. So basically what they replied was, don't be deceived by this, this victory, this that you have got against these people. Your battle so far was with Quraysh, and these are the ignorant, illiterate people, and you just defeated them by chance. We are rich and educated and powerful people. If you ever fight us, then we will show you what a battle is, or you would know what men are. Like, we are the real men. Basically, they were talking like that, right? And important to note here is that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was not warning them of himself, but he was warning them about punishment from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. But they kind of, like, when somebody is arrogant, they don't even listen to the whole message. They just like they just take what they want to take sometimes, right? So they just take half the message, they listen half the thing, and they just take it according to that, right? And some narrations about this also quote some other ayat from Surah Al-Hashr that were revealed to warn those people as well, right? So this was and what Prophet ﷺ had warned them of, this actually was proven true only a little while later, when Banu Kenka, and later in the Sirah we learn that Banu Kenka and Banu Nadir of the Jewish tribes, they were outcasted, and Banu Qurayza was taken over, and their men were killed and women were enslaved. So also what this says is, this is a message for every worldly power that is plotting against Islam, that the only way, like, when the Muslims are true, then Allah's help is with them and you cannot overpower them. But also it is a message for us that the only way the help will come for Muslims is when Muslims become Muslims, right? Like, um, and then in the next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give an example of how Allah's help comes for the believers. And then Pharaoh is talked about in the very next ayah, right? And today, when we look at a lot of us, when we look at the wealth and the children of the people of people who are not believers, who are not even Muslims, then sometimes a lot of believers, even, like, they feel envy, or they feel like, oh my God, they have so much and everything, and we don't have so much. But what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us is, don't feel envious about them. Their wealth and their children are in fact not going to benefit them at all. In fact, wealth and children are the two things that stop usually people from accepting, like, these are the two things which have been made extremely pleasing to human beings, and they are the reason that become a reason for most people to stop them from the path of the truth, right? And these are the main reasons, but then people make up other excuses to cover up these reasons, and the real reason is, like, their moral weakness, and then they are really attached to their wealth and their children and everything. But they try to then make up things like, okay, no, this message is false, or this and that, even when they understood it, right? So, and how do they become, even in today's world, we can see how do wealth and children stop a person many times from the path of the truth, right? Men are usually stopped by wealth. Like, the wealth is a major concern, and they're always like, and it's natural. Allah Ta'ala has put that in, because men are supposed to be the providers. Allah Ta'ala has put that calculation in their mind, that they're always calculating about wealth and everything. But then whatever Allah Ta'ala has given us, we can channel it, in a good way, right? And women by children. Women, the major weakness for women is children, right? For but any wealth, or for example, a person is so involved in earning that he's like mindless of his salah, right? So what has the wealth done then for him? He had that the wealth then has taken him away from the truth, has taken him away from submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when the time of salah had come, right? Similarly, a child in caring for whom or something, who takes a person away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then such a child can never be a coolness suffice for a person, right? So wealth and children usually become a lot of reason become a reason for a lot of people to go away or stay away from Islam. Some A lot of people give the excuse of wealth and children, like we have to earn money, we don't have time to study the Quran, or we don't have time to do this because we have to earn as well, we have to live in as, or my children need me, my children need this. But if we think about it, our children's needs, no matter what age or stage or abilities our children are, our children will always need us somewhat. So right, so they'll be, so whether even when our children have their own children, then some people say no, our grandchildren need us, or we need to take care of this, or my daughter's sick and I need to be there. Like, yes, sometimes are unavoidable, but then if it is stopping us all the time, then there is something wrong with that. And also what we see is like, and these the mention of mal and aulad is also so relevant here, because what we do, generally speaking, what people do is we earn and we earn and earn, we earn money and we spend usually on our children. That's what our we like to love to spend the most on is our children, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that both mal and aulad, they are really beneficial only when we utilize it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we raise our children such that they have understanding of who Allah ta'ala is, that they submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they want to do something, whatever they are able to do, that they want to do something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if it is just doing the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then those children will benefit us too, both in this life and the afterlife. And the mal as well, that when we spend it in good ways, then it will benefit us, right? Also, what we learn here is that a Muslim cannot be like a kafir, right? That a Muslim cannot be like a kafir, because it is the way of a kafir to be so involved in wealth and children that you get away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A Muslim cannot do that, because when a Muslim does that, they will basically they will not just ruin themselves but also others around them, right? And when we do everything about our life and utilize it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that thing stays. One of the scholars, they said, "Makana lillahi fahuwa abqa." Whatever is for the sake of Allah, that will stay. Only that will be protected. Only that will be saved. Everything else is like you've lost it. You've it's not become beneficial to you at all, right? And like when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that they will become the fuel of fire, these people will become the fuel of fire, then what does that mean? Like, it's like these people itself will be used to lit that fire. Like you can think of them as like the coal, or like the wood or everything. And if we think about it, then when people lit a fire, let's say a campfire or something, and they have lit a fire, then what do we put in that fire to increase the fire, as like to keep it going? We put like any garbage, paper, any garbage things that we don't really need. Like, okay, let's just burn this, let's just burn this, let's just burn this, right? But and let it fuel the fire. So um, one thing is that what is not valuable, we don't save it, right? It's just garbage then. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in a way, it's a way of humiliation as well, that they will be the fuel of the fire, meaning they're worthless. Such people who just lost in their money and their children and everything, and they're fighting against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They have understood the message and then they're still denying it, and they keep on denying it out of their arrogance, out of their worldly desires. Then those people are worthless to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah ta'ala not make us of them and protect us from that. Here also, one of the scholars, Ibn Ashur rahimahullah, he says that just the ayat before that, if we see the ayat before that, we were talking about rasikhuna fil ilm, then we were talking about the duas of the people of the believers and everything, and now all of a sudden there's a switch about the people who are disbelievers and everything. And he says that after this revelation, humility, duas, and now this switch in the subject about disbelievers and punishment. He says this is like a norm in the Quran. If we see the pattern, a lot of the times Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, many times, he follows up good news with warning, or he will follow warning with good news. And Quran is both a bashir and a nadir. It's both gives good news and it warns as well. Both go hand in hand. So when we're giving the message of Islam, or when we're understanding the message of Islam for ourselves, there is both of them have to be there all the time. Like hope and fear have to be there. Both of them have to be there. There has to be a balance in us, for both of them. That yes, we strive for Jannah, and we keep protecting ourselves from, we keep doing things to protect ourselves from the hellfire, right? We say رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ, right? So we don't want to go in the fire, right? We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for protection. And even many other narrations we have like that, like Umar radiallahu anhu, when he used to say that if every person was going to hellfire except one, I would hope that I would be the one who was saved. Uh, oh, sorry, if every person was not going to Jannah and just one person was going to Jannah, I would hope that I would be that one person who's going to Jannah. And if every person was saved from Jahannam and one person was going to, I knew that only one person is going to Jahannam, I would fear that I would be that person, right? So we have to, the thing about the Quran is we have to see ourselves in the ayat of the Quran and think about ourselves. And that's why whenever the Prophet ﷺ was reciting the Quran and he would come to the ayat about the hellfire, he would seek protection, Allah's protection against the hellfire, and he would make dua to Allah to protect himself from the hellfire. And when he would come across the ayat of Jannah, then he would ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he would pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make him from amongst those people. And that is also something that we should follow, right? That so when we are reading these ayat, may Allah ta'ala protect us from being such people. May Allah ta'ala protect us from being the people of the hellfire. Interestingly, also the comparison, if you look at the previous ayat and these ayat, the usually the comparison would be like Jannah and Jahannam, rewards of the believers versus punishment of the disbelievers. But here it is the duas of the believers versus the state of the disbelievers. What is the state that the disbelievers are in, right? And in a way, it is a hint by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the people who had made this dua, that Ya Allah, make our hearts soft, make our hearts, don't let our hearts deviate towards misguidance and everything. Rabbana la tuzigh qulubana, right? That Ya Allah, like let not our hearts deviate after you've guided us, and grant us from your self mercy. And you will gather people on the day about which there is no doubt, and you do not fail on your promise. And they were asking basically for softening of their hearts, for their humility, for their correct guidance. And what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing us, that and then state of disbelievers, meaning that the state that the believers were asking for, Allah Ta'ala has granted them that. That's why it's contrasting with the state of the disbelievers. So there's a little thing which is understood in between, that Allah Ta'ala granted their dua, meaning they made this dua and Allah Ta'ala granted them this dua, and that is their state. And what it also refers to, what Ibn Shur also says to the effect that that softening of hearts itself, that is the victory for the believers. Like what actually happens in a war, what actually happens in different situations, that is something that rest comes eventually. But what is the real victory? The real victory for the believers is the heart, the softening of the heart, right? And so the contrast here is the hearts of the believers being straightened versus the disbelievers who are being annihilated, right? So, and also what we learn in these four ayat, if we see the pattern of these four ayat, in ayah number 10, we learn that disbelievers will fail in the future. Then Allah Ta'ala gives in ayah number 11 the historical example of Pharaoh, the Pharaoh, and how and other people before Pharaoh and how they failed. And in the and then Allah Ta'ala tells again in ayah number 12 that disbelievers will fail in future, right? Then again this thing is said. And then ayah number 13, the historical example, which was a bit recent for the people at the time this ayat were being revealed, is the example of Badr. But for us, it's history as well. So the historical example of Badr. And Badr talked about the Pharaoh of their time, the Pharaoh of the time of the Prophet ﷺ, because Abu Jahl is also known as the Pharaoh of our Ummah, the Pharaoh of the Ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, right? So, and then, so here, um, again, just to reiterate here that some people think that sometimes, many times, many times, many people of power, they think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not overpower them. That, they have money, they have children. And even today we find that a lot of somebody who has money, a lot of money, lot of children who are maybe a lot of sons and everything, especially, then people feel that, what, God is happy with me. Like I'm good. Like I'm good. There's nothing going to happen to me. And, like I'm all set. And like, God has blessed me so much here. God will bless me later on as well. And nobody will overpower me here. Nothing's going to happen to me here. I'm just like, and they keep increasing in their money and their power and everything, and they have this mindset that they have, nobody can overpower them, or Allah's not going to punish them. Why would Allah punish them or anything? And Allah will not overpower them as well. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala crushes this mindset through this ayah, that just because you have money and power and children, it does not mean that you have Allah's mercy, or that you should stop asking for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy, right? Because these people, what they think is, we are already good. We don't need anything and everything, right? And sometimes, even at an individual level, what happens to all of us, to us, is that when we have a lot of blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we get a bit like slack in our prayers. So we get a bit slack in our dua and dhikr. But when we are going through a hardship, then our duas become like, we are making so much duas, we are going through such a hard time. Then our, like, salah increases, our time in salah increases. We are making so much dua, we are making so much dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us here is that you are always, each one of us is always in need of him for every single need of ours. Every single breath we need him. And it's not like, the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or being near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is not like an oxygen mask that we just need to put on when we need it and then we can remove it, right? And if somebody has that kind of a mindset, then it could become a disease. It has a potential to become a disease, and for a person. And then when it becomes a disease for a person, then it has a potential of spreading the same disease in the entire society, right? That they don't just misguide themselves, they misguide others too. So what is the right mindset? That, uh, not to obviously just believe, and then to keep connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all times, and not let our wealth and our children distract us. Like the three things that will hold us strong is this: our salah, our dhikr, and our shukr. And, like, the more dhikr we do, the more, and there's a saying to the effect of that, we need a person sitting comfortably in their home, which with all the pleasures of their home, is as much in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a person who is in the middle of the ocean in a storm, in a small boat in the dark night, right? Like, as a person who's in a storm in a middle of the ocean at a dark night, and the boat is small and weak. The kind of need that that person has, the same amount of need each one of us has of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at every moment in our lives. Even if we are feeling content, even if things are working how they're supposed to, things are working in a way that is making us happy and everything, we are still as much in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So not let that take us away from any of these things, right? And also what happens, is sometimes when someone looks very successful in a worldly terms, everyone wants to be like them, right? So when a society is materially very successful, we end up taking that mindset as well, right? That is, we don't take positives like discipline, hard work, how to build roads, but we take from them what? Materialism, heedlessness, shamelessness. We take all these things from a society that looks very successful just because they look very successful, right? And Quraysh were the custodians of the Kaaba at that time. They were the spiritual leaders of the region, and, they had this kind of belief that they have all this wealth, everything's going on for them, they don't need to do anything. And because they had this kind of belief, it would trickle down to the rest of the region as well. So it was really important to get the mindset correct, right? And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says wukudun nar, meaning dried wood that is thrown into the fire, that has no other purpose, that is worthless, right? And these people who have a lot of wealth and power, and money, they feel that they are very valuable, and that they're more valuable than other human beings because of the money and the power that they have. But to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're useless and worthless, right? And may Allah ta'ala protect us from being amongst those people. And then Allah ta'ala gives us the example of, that if you want to understand this, that how they wealth and children will not benefit against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you want to understand this, then look at the classic example of Pharaoh. What happened to him? What happened with him? The house of Pharaoh and those before them. Those before them meaning the people of Ad, the people of Thamud, the people at the time of Shoaib alayhi salam, right? And take lesson from their fate, and we will learn about them throughout the Quran, right? The people of at the time of Nuh alayhi salam, the people at the time of Lut alayhi salam. What happened at all with all those people? What was their fate? What happened to them? Who the people who opposed the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even before Musa alayhi salam, way before Musa alayhi salam, and what was their fate? What happened to them, right? And what was their sin? Their sin was that they denied the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They denied the miracles when the miracles were clear in front of their eyes, right? Even when the sea parted in front of the eyes of Pharaoh, he was still so arrogant that he ran after them to still kill them. Like they're walking on the floor of the ocean. That would have been enough to, he still had time when he was like, he had not gone after them into the bed of the ocean. He still had time. He had seen this big miracle, huge. He has been seeing all these other miracles before of Musa alayhi salam that we learned in the Quran at other places. But this was such a huge sign in front of him, and yet he was so arrogant that I will not drown. Nothing is going to happen to me. I'm the most powerful one, and I will just go and finish these people and everything. He was still only when he was drowning, then he said, no, 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 I believe, I believe. When the water had literally reached his nose, then he said that, right? And so that's their big crime, real big crime. They call the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lie. They call the miracles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lie. They call the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lie. They understood it, and then they denied it still. And then what was the result? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala seized them with severe punishment. Every nation that got the severe punishment had a crime that they indulged in as a nation. Like Lut alayhi salam, the people of Lut alayhi salam, they had a crime, right? They were engaged in homosexuality and things like that. The people of Shoaib alayhi salam, they were engaged in like other practices. The people of Thamud, they had all different kind of crimes. Like one group of people had, they cheated other people. One group did something else. They had these crimes, but then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent them the prophets to bring them back to the right path. Yet they rejected the prophets also because they wanted to stick to their crimes because it was bringing them all these wealth and everything. So in this was a warning for people then at the time when these ayat are coming down. In this was a big warning for people of both Makkah and Medina, that this is the custom of this is what happened to the people of Pharaoh and those before them. They denied our signs. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees them, and Allah's punishment is very, very severe. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ar-Rahman, but when he punishes, then his punishment is very severe. And you are proud of your sons and your wealth. Think of Pharaoh, who had unimaginable worldly wealth and power. Like everyone knows the pharaohs even today. They were the superpower of that time, so much so that they were even worshipped like God. Astaghfirullah. But here, so they got this punishment, right? And any punishment that comes around us, if people are not on the belief, then it is, it. It is to understand that why is this punishment coming, why is like when uh, a lot of scholars, what they say is when any storm comes or when any earthquake comes or anything, just think about it. Have we as a people been engaged in some sins that the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has come? It could be a test if people are. It could be not a punishment. It could be a test, but that depends on what it is making the people go towards. If anything that happens which is unpleasant, but it takes us towards Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, that's a sign that it is a test. But if something happens that takes us away from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, that is a sign that it was a punishment, right? So we need to see what is going on, right? And when sins increase, then Allah's punishment comes. Even in this world, Allah's punishment comes, right? And if we look at the Muslim ummah today, sometimes a lot of people say, but like if you look at the Muslims today, they're engaged in so much sin. They're engaged in so many of Muslims are engaged in so much wrong. Yet subhanallah, is the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he has not wiped out this Muslim ummah like the previous nations were wiped out. That literally we don't see any of their descendants now because they were totally wiped out. They were totally destroyed. As a community, they were totally destroyed. But it is because of the du'as of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the kind of du'as he made, the you know the in the night he would keep praying and keep praying and keep praying until his legs would swell. He would pray so much his leg would swell, and he would keep crying, and he would keep making dua for his ummah, and he would make dua for all of us, each one of us. He would make dua for us that Allah Ta'ala forgives us for our sins. And even before dying, he was making dua for us. He was asking, what will Allah Ta'ala do regarding my ummah? And the Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala sent him the message that Allah will please you regarding your ummah, meaning Allah Ta'ala, and just subhanAllah, it is the dua of our Prophet Sallallahu that's protecting us. But the sins that we do, they have a cost, and they have a cost even in this world. They have a cost for us, even individually, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is severe in punishment, meaning whatever punishments human beings receive from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's a consequence to our own misdeeds, and it is a just response. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just, and it is a just response to our actions. So it is not like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like punish someone more than what they deserve. People will only get punishment according to what they deserve. Also, just like the physical laws that Allah Ta'ala has established in this world, like like there are physical laws of gravity. There's so many physical laws that Allah Ta'ala has established in the universe around us. Similarly, there are also moral laws of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala concerning the consequences of actions, and these laws are also impartial and immutable. They take effect at their proper time and place. Nobody can, like, they will happen for sure, and no one can escape them or help another person, right? Like we are, each one of us is accountable for our own self. Also here, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says kada'bi, da'bi refers to something like a case, a story, or legacy of something, or exhausting ourselves in doing something over and over again. When we do something over and over and over again, what happens is that becomes a habit, right? That's just how those people function. Then that's their habit now, right? And Prophet ﷺ was inviting them, and they disbelieved. Then Prophet ﷺ was inviting them again, and they disbelieved again. And this was happening again and again and again. Now they have got into the habit of disbelieving, just like Pharaoh and his leadership. Right? This is just who they are now. And al, when it says Ali Pharaoh, al refers to, is used for a person, for their identity, for their family. It's used for someone who closely follows somebody else. So this is being used for the elite class of people of Mecca of that time, because what they were doing is they were very closely following the way of the Pharaoh. And what was the way of the Pharaoh? It was a dictatorship. It was the family related to the king who was in the political leadership, right? And in case of the Pharaoh, it was the family ties and political leadership altogether, all these leaders. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not just criticizing the Pharaoh himself, but also the people who are close to Pharaoh. Like the Pharaoh himself, although he had so much money and power, he was an old man who couldn't even stand straight, right? We learn at other places that he was a very old man who couldn't even stand straight, but he had so much wealth and power and so much arrogance, right? But who was giving him all this sense of perceived authority? That was the close knit people around him. So the people around him who were, and we see that in organizations, and we also see it in political circles and everything, that there is this one leader who's acting all arrogant and this and that, but there are people around him who are feeding his arrogance because they're getting benefits out of it as well. So there are people, so it's not just one person in vacuum. There are people around him who are, like who are also to blame. In fact, all the more to blame. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is criticizing basically the circle of the close circle of Pharaoh. And that, if we see, we will find it in other organizations too, right? And Quraysh have also at this time had this perceived power and in the hands of a certain handful of people, and they were dragging everyone into war. They were dragging everyone into fighting the Muslims of that time. And then the next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that to the Prophet sallallahu that say to these people, right? First of all, قُلْ لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. The Prophet sallallahu, if we know the personality of the Prophet sallallahu, he was by nature a very merciful person, a very soft person, right? And he was, he would speak in a very, like a very soft tones and very gentle tones to people, and he would never say anything harsh to anybody, right? But the Prophet Prophet's personality is one thing, and the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something else. The word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is full of authority. At times it is very aggressive as well, and it does not apologize. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Malikul Mulk, right? He's not at this bar with human beings, astaghfirullah, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking to his slaves, right? So the Prophet sallallahu, there are things that need to be said that the Prophet sallallahu cannot say on his own, and he's being told to say them, right? So the Prophet sallallahu is told, say this like this clearly, right? Even though the Prophet sallallahu by nature is a very gentle person, sometimes you have to say things, and here he has to convey the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as it is. So kul refers to that even if an authoritative and aggressive tone is not the usual nature of the Prophet sallallahu, but the ayat of Allah are another thing, that you have to convey the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as they are, right? So the Nabi sallallahu had to recite the most offensive ayat to the Quraysh, right, with no army behind him. So if we just put ourselves in the position of the Prophet sallallahu, he had to say things to the Quraysh. He did not have any army behind him and anything, but still he had to recite the ayat which are very offensive to the Quraysh, and he had to say them out loud to them, right? Um, and here again, um, this ayah, right? It is also again an open warning to all deniers of the Quran, that whatever your evil designs could be against it, they're bound to fail, and you're going to suffer defeat at the hands of the bearers of the Quran, right? That is going to happen, and this is a serious warning that should not be taken lightly, because hell fire is the most horrible and dreadful place, right? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says it is an evil place, it is an evil place, it is a dreadful place. And this warning was needed, as it is needed even today, because it is difficult for us to correctly grasp or even to visualize something which is in the unseen, like hellfire. Nobody has seen the hellfire, so it is important for us to understand the seriousness of it, right? Because and even if it is comprehensible to some extent, if we have learned a lot of ayat and a lot of description of the hellfire from the Quran and the Hadith, and we understand the seriousness of it, even sometimes like we might lose focus, or we might and because of losing focus we might ignore because of either forgetfulness or laziness or things like that, right? So that might happen. So this is a very serious warning, and sometimes it is needed for us to be reminded. We need to be reminded of hellfire, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that whoever has this attitude of rejecting the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he will meet with the similar fate that these people met with. And regarding this ayat, it is said that on the authority of Ibn Abbas, radiallahu anhu, that the Jews among the people of Medina, they said, like some normal Jews, like day-to-day Jews, when they saw the battle of Badr and the victory, and they actually remembered that, our books say that, and so many of them were actually said, this maybe this is the unlettered prophet about whom Musa alayhi salam informed us, and we find his description in our scripture, and we find the description that his banner will not be repelled, and they wanted to believe him and follow him. They wanted to go and believe in him, but then their leaders, what they didn't want to lose their business, they didn't want to lose their following, they didn't want to lose their position of fame and power and everything. So they said, you know what, to these day-to-day simple minded Jews, they said, don't be hasty, you know what, let's wait and see how he fares in another battle. And then on the day of Uhud, when Sahabas had some loss, although it was not a total loss for the Muslims, because we know what happened after Uhud. There was a setback, and the Quraysh went their way, and the Muslims went their way, and then Prophet ﷺ told the Muslims they were hurt, they were injured. They said when they were expecting a comeback, that the Quraysh are going to come back. The Prophet ﷺ said, "We are not going to wait for comeback. We are going to go." And they went back to fight, and they waited there for 3 days, even though they were hurt, injured, everything. They went there, waiting for them to come to fight again. But then Quraysh never came back. They got scared when they learned that the Muslims were coming and everything. So they never came back. So it was not a defeat for the Muslims, but again, they had suffered a lot of loss. And it was not a total victory either, right? So when the Battle of Uhud happened, then they said to the Jewish leadership, they said to their people that no, this is not the one. Maybe this is not the one, and we don't need to follow him and everything. And thus they were overcome by misery, and they did not accept Islam. And uh, there was an agreement between them, as we know that happened, like when Medina was established, when the Prophet ﷺ came and everything, and that they will cooperate with each other, they will not assist the enemies against each other and everything. So which some of their leaders, they went against it, they cancelled it, they went against their treaty. And Ka'b bin al-Ashraf, he rode out along with 60 riders to the people of Makkah. He went to Abu Sufyan and his companions, and they basically came to an agreement saying, you know what, let our word be one, meaning that we will support you. You go against Muslims and prepare yourself against Muslims, and we'll support you, which was clearly against the treaty. So when the Prophet ﷺ took action against the Jewish tribes later on in the Sirah, it was not because they were Jews. It was because they had gone against a treaty, and it was a political thing that they had basically cheated, and they had done so. So the punishment was in accordance with that, and not because they were like they were Jews or anything. The Prophet ﷺ, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us guidelines on how to behave with people of the book who might or might not accept, right? So religion. So some people use these incidents to talk against the Prophet ﷺ, but astaghfirullah, but it is important to understand the seerah. That's even more, right? And some readers, when reading these ayat, they have a doubt that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the disbelievers will be overcome. But what about the disbelievers of the world today? We don't see them being overcome. And just to clarify to that doubt, because this overcoming of disbelievers mentioned in this ayah does not refer to disbelievers universally, just like we talked before. Kafir here does not refer to all people who disbelieve or any non-Muslim. Rather, in this context, it's referring particularly to the disbelievers of Jews, and even in Jews of that time, the Jewish leadership who knowingly went against the things of that particular time, right? And they were overcome. And how they were overcome? They were the pagans were overcome of that time. The mushrikeen were overcome in the war, and they were taken as prisoners, killed, and everything. And the Jews of that time, they were overcome. Different tribes faced different things. Extradition, jizya was imposed, or killing or imprisonment. Different things happened because they opposed and they went against their words. Then in the next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that already there was a sign for you in the two groups who confronted each other in the Battle of Badr. One group was fighting in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the other disbelieving group, they saw themselves, and the other group was of the displeasing people, and they saw themselves as twice their number from open eyes, meaning it was not just a thought in their head, they actually saw them like that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives strength with his help to whoever he wills. Indeed, in this is a lesson for those who have eyes, right? So um, one thing is, because there are too many pronouns in this, and there are different meanings that have been taken about who saw whom as double, right? So one thing was, one opinion that is said is that the Quraysh, they were very relaxed, and they took their enemy as they underestimated them. But when the clash actually happened, Quraysh felt that these guys were everywhere, that they felt they were double of what they were, and they just couldn't handle it. They saw the Quraysh, saw the Muslims as double in their number. That is, during their fight as double, and they felt they were everywhere. And they before they saw them less, but then they saw them way more, right? And that's one of the meanings. But other meaning, which is more commonly cited, is that each group saw the other as double of themselves, meaning the Muslims were 313 in number, and they saw the disbelieving army, the army of the Quraysh, as 626. Actually, how much they were? Actually, they were around 1,000, 950, around 950. So nearing 1,000. But the believers actually saw them as just double of their number, meaning 626, meaning each person has to take on two people, basically. And when Muslims saw them as double their number, it increased them in confidence, that they can take them, and they were, although they were not prepared for the battle, they have very few resources, yet they felt they could handle them. The Quraysh, on the other hand, also, it is said, saw them as double of themselves. So, meaning the Quraysh were around 1,000, they saw the Muslims as 2,000. And what that did was that weakened them, that weakened their resolve, that made them like lose all their confidence that there are so many. How are we going to fight them? Right. So, so both these group that met each other, and the for meeting each other, the word that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has uses fi atainil at-taqata. Now this word, it is meaning when two meeting with a protocol, like when two, it is used when two oceans clash against each other. Then this word is used. Right? They met each other. So these two groups, they met each other against each other, meaning they went on a war against each other, and obviously referring to the Battle of Badr. and we know a little bit more about the Battle of Badr, what happened and everything. So um, when they met and everything, but we know also that major leaders of Quraysh were killed in this battle. Abu Jahl, Utbah, Shayba, Rabia, all these major leaders were literally killed, and Muslims also had some loss, but throughout the Arab region, this it spread about this news spread about this small group of Muslims who has overpowered this huge group. And even today, not only Muslims but also non-Muslim historians, even today, they look at this battle and they're amazed by the victory of that Muslim god. How did this happen? All right, and they give like this reason and that reason, maybe this, maybe that, maybe that, and and that is all okay. But like for us, that doesn't impose any problem because asbab is in Allah's hands. What we believe is, if this was an impossible kind of victory, and but Allah Ta'ala made it happen. How He made it happen, He made the asbab. They're all in His control anyway, right? And right, the lesson for us here is that the entity who can help his people at the time of Badr can also help me and you today. It's the same Rab who helped these 313 people take on this 1,000 people. These 313 people with no resources, literally with no resources. They had literally two horses, they had 70 camels, and they had eight swords from which to take on 1,000 people. Even their clothes were not so full. Even with this, they took on this 1,000 people and won, right? And so for a believer, our tawakkul, our reliance is never on our resources. We use our resources; they are for us to use. But our tawakkul is always on Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. And we know Allah Subhanahu wa Taala can make things happen with or without asbab. Like we might see some things going on in our favor, we might not see some things going on in our favor, but Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is the owner of everything, right? And a scholar was asked that, okay, yeah, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala helped those people, but why doesn't the help of Allah come to Muslims today? Why aren't the Muslims being helped today? And subhanAllah, the scholar replied, you know what? Angels come down to help the Muslims, but they don't find any Muslims today. Right? They didn't find any Muslims when they came down. May Allah Ta'ala forgive us, and may Allah Ta'ala protect us and make us Hakiki Muslim, that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that they were fighting fi sabilillah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't say the Muslims were fighting. Like, it's not just a name which is important. We might call ourselves whatever, but are we doing things for the sake of Allah? That is the big thing, right? The perspective, also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is explaining to us the perspective of jihad in Islam. Jihad in Islam is not for the sake of pride or bravery or my tribe or my badge or my honor or the resources or oil or diamonds or land or whatever. The fighting in Islam is for the sake of Allah and nothing else. We don't we fight for the sake of Allah. Our goal is to fight for the sake of Allah, and then it becomes acceptable by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever we do, when we are doing it for the sake of Allah, then it becomes accepted, right? And we pray that Allah Ta'ala makes us such that he builds such iman in us that we call to Allah's help, and when we need Allah's help and the help of Allah comes, that we need that iman. And Umar radiallahu anhu actually used to say that I'm not worried about whether Allah will answer my dua or not. I'm worried about my making the dua and how I make the dua, right? Because that is something that I worry about, if I do that correct or not. And so it is, when we also see that people saw each other as twice their own number, we also learn that it is Allah's kudra. He can make anything, even he to the bit of how to inspire confidence in somebody. Allah Ta'ala can make things look like how he wants them to look at, right? Allah Ta'ala controls how we look at things, and what we see and how we see it and everything, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps those who have ikhlas. These people, they were a small group, yet they had ikhlas. And today Muslims are the second largest religion, yet we are weaker than those 313 people. We are if you look at our condition, in political terms, financial terms, social terms, what is the strength that Muslims have today? Are we as strong as even those 313 people? Even though we are in billions, we are not. May Allah Ta'ala protect us. And why is that? Because of ikhlas, that we need to build in ourselves the ikhlas, right? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that in this are the signs for people who have eyes, who can see, who have a vision, meaning who can see from their own eyes, who can take ibrah, right? Ibrat is to to see, to have a vision, to see, like to take a lesson from something, to be insightful, right? So those who have eyes can clearly see the future. With the Battle of Badr, those who had eyes, they could clearly see how the course of events is going to happen, how the ongoing conflict between the good and evil is going to end. They could see from this. It was a big sign for them, right? And which happens all the time, even in our lives now. Even a small sign, if we are ready to look and listen and understand, then even a small sign can open a whole universe of meaning for us, whole universe of wisdom for us. We can see ocean in a drop if we are willing to see. But that's the difference between an insightful versus an unthinking person. Like insightful person will see the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and will try to ponder over them to the best of their own ability. And an unthinking person cannot see beyond their own nose. All they care about is their own ego, their own nose, like what am I, and my arrogance, what am I doing and how I'm doing, and all those kind of things, right? So also this proves to us that we should ask for the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent help, right? And when Allah helps, when we get the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then everything which is hard becomes easy. And we have duas to the effect of that as well, that there is nothing that is easy except what Allah makes it easy. Everything's difficult except what Allah makes it easy. It is difficult for me to just get up and get a glass of water even, unless Allah helps me for that, right? But also, it also tells us as believers that when we are upon haqq, then we are never alone. We are never alone when we are on haqq. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help is with us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's aid is with us. With ta'id, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's support with us is with us. And aid, it is said that it is a support which is usually used for help through angels. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends angels. Like it is said that when we get out of our house and we say Bismillahi tawakkaltu ala Allah, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al azim. Then when we have left our house and until we reach our destination, wherever we are traveling to, whether it's from home to office or from America to India, no matter how much our travel is, when we say this dua and leave our house until we reach the destination, Allah Ta'ala appoints angels to protect us on the way, that we don't meet with an accident, we don't do this. Allah Ta'ala appoints angels to this. So that is his aid to protect us, right? And so angel also, we learn that angels descend by Allah's help, right? Angels can't just come by themselves. Angels are how they help us, they support us, but they are powerless without Allah's help. They help by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only, right? And when Allah ta'ala decides to help someone, then about the enemies, whatever strength they have, whatever money they have, whatever power they have, none of it matters, right? And the lesson for the people of vision is that Badr was a sign which should make people who can see enter the fold of Islam. It was a lesson for all people. It was a lesson for Jews because it was for them a repeat of the story between what? Between Talut and Goliath, between when Dawud al-Islam killed Jalut, which we saw in in Surah Al-Baqarah. We learned about that story in which there was similar group of people, 313 people, who kept the discipline, didn't drink from the stream, and went ahead, and they conquered a huge army of Goliath. So they were the story that they had read in their scriptures. The Jews of that time had read in their scriptures. They were seeing it unfold in front of their eyes with this battle of Badr. There were so many battles between these two. I mean, we can't, because of lack of time, we can't talk more about it. But there were so many parallels between these two battles that such a small group overpowering a large group, and just like the Bani Israel at that time, Muslims were deprived of their Qibla, and they are trying to get back to it and everything. So there's so many things that are happening. For Christians, it reminded them, because in Gospel of John it is clearly stated that when the final prophet sallallahu appears, he will wage jihad with the power of truth, and he will be accompanied by angels. And this prophecy was fulfilled. We learn from many reports that many people during the Battle of Badr actually saw angels with their own eyes, and which they reported later after they became Muslims, that we saw this and we saw this and we saw this, right? And also, there were a lot of parallels because Jews were saved from the Pharaoh, yet now they are siding with the Quraysh, which are like pharaohs of their time. So you are the people of Torah. How can you go on the wrong side? You are supposed to be on the right side, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us so much through these ayat and everything that and for Quraysh also, because before they declared this battle, they before this battle happened, before they were coming to this battle, they declared that, this battle, it will be a clear indication of what is the truth and what is false. Abu Jahl even made dua that, Ya Allah, to the effect that, Ya Allah, today whoever is on the right side, make them victorious, and whoever was on the wrong side, destroy them. Yet when they were being destroyed, they didn't admit to Islam, and yet they didn't come back to Islam. So that was their arrogance. And Allah Ta'ala warns us of those people through these ayat that we learned today, that those people who disbelieve. And when the signs of Allah come to us, may Allah Ta'ala make us of those people who believe in them, who accept them, and who submit to them. May Allah Ta'ala make us of those people who do not let arrogance or the love of our wealth or the love of our children come in our way, because wealth and children are the blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah Ta'ala help us utilize ourselves, our wealth, our children, and all the blessings that we have for His sake, and to be in the path of Allah no matter what we do. May Allah Ta'ala accept our coming together for His sake. And just like Allah Ta'ala united us as sisters in Islam in this world, may Allah Ta'ala reunite us as sisters in Islam on the day of judgment under the shade of His throne, when there'll be no shade except His. And then once again in Jannatul Firdaus under the shade of His throne. Ameen Ya Arhamar Rahimin. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم سبحانك اللهم أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك 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 ونتوب إليك.